hour as well.
Sure.
Well, welcome everybody. I'm glad we were able to finally connect and coordinate schedules. Rafik, I hope that we are not making this a ridiculously inconvenient time for you. But everyone, this is obviously for the record, Paul Diaz from PIR. On the call, Jon will do, is on the call as well. Jon Nevett as well as Ryan Symbolic, our general counsel. Connect and we wanted to provide the opportunity. We know that you all saw we are not the public interest commitments that we made a week ago Friday, but we subsequently held a webinar to address questions. We continue to receive follow-on questions and are providing additional commentary on our key facts about .org website. But we wanted to give NCSG an opportunity to have a direct exchange with you all. So here we are today. With that, I think let me turn it over to Jon and we'll take it from there.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Thanks for the opportunity to have a conversation about the future of .org and the transaction with Ethos Capital. As you know, I'm seeing a note from Milton. Milton got this right from the start, which is not unusual. Having a contractual commitment made the most sense from the start. It just took a little while for folks to get there. So we're in a position now where we heard from the community. Ethos heard from the community, where at first they made some commitments, and people wanted accountability for those commitments. They then suggested putting in their formation documents. People wanted something more concrete, and so they went with the gold standard, which is not only put in the contract with ICANN, but putting it in the public interest commitment, so it's enforceable not only by ICANN but by anyone in the world through the PIC DRP, or the dispute resolution process. So I think we got to the point that Milton telegraphed way back when, as far as PIR and PIR staff goes, we're kind of the football player that's been traded from one team to the other, and some of the fans aren't happy, and we're going through that and making sure we get to where we need to be. I look at the transaction from my perspective in a way that at first, when we first learned about it, it was clearly I think a good thing for ISOC. I won't talk about the process they used in getting there, and that's their process. They did what they thought would be the best way to do it, and that I understand that, and working with their board of trustees. But the bottom line is they get a well-funded endowment that'll propel them in the future for all their funding needs. Whereas now we fund ISOC's annual budget for the most part, and but they're relying on one company in one industry, and so anyone who would look at risk concerns based on that would understand that they're in a much better position going forward. Ethos obviously is better off from my perspective, in that they get the crown jewel of the domain name system. .org has the best semantic meaning, best customers, mission based, so they do well out of this. So then the question is, what happens to PIR and PIR's community and the .org community? And the thing that I'm excited about is the things that I'm excited about are one, the reinvestment. Right now we've been in perpetual harvest mode with ISOC, that everything we bring in we send up there, so in excess of $50 million a year plus, and they use that for their great work. But it doesn't leave us an opportunity to have long-term investment in .org. Things like getting into other markets. We're very North American centric, and we want to expand to other markets. And that takes a level of investment that doesn't pay off in a year, maybe even 2 years. So we have to put money in now and have the returns come in later. And from ISOC perspective, that's probably not all that palatable, because they use the money that we would otherwise invest in their own products, or their own services rather, and their own activities through their annual budget. So unless something has an in-year return, it's very hard to reinvest in that. So now we'll have the ability to invest in new markets. We'll have the opportunity to do some studies, market studies, research studies to see if there are other products and services that make sense for our community. And we have a very broad and vast community. It's not just 501c3 nonprofits, as you know. We like to market to folks who want to do good on the internet, and that could be, a corporate social responsibility site. It could be, a family. It could be a club. It could be informal gatherings, family reunions, whatever, what have you. My daughter's a big soccer player, and so it could be her soccer club. So I'll get to the questions in 1 second. Just let me just finish this. I see that Milton has a question. So anyway, we think the benefit of reinvestment is strong. We also like we currently engage in education and outreach efforts, but we have to do it at a relatively modest scale. And the commitment of $10 million is very significant and a very big increase. And we're excited to see what we can do with those funds to improve our community, the .org community. So I'm excited about that as well. Paul saying that there's a question. I don't see it in the chat, but it looks like it has a hand up. Okay, I got Milton and then Rafik.
Good morning, John. How you doing?
Morning. How are you, Milton?
All right. So I think this dialogue has been going on for several months now, and we pretty much understand the basic lay of the land in terms of what motivated it and how you're reacting. I think we really wanted to get into the nitty-gritty about some of the things in the PICs, and in particular, I think I flagged in a blog post, and others have commented on. We think that the Stewardship Council could be, it could be a significant development, but in its current manifestation, it seems like it could just also easily be, a group of people that you select and you feel comfortable with. And we're hoping that you can make this more of a independent representative body where the civil society organizations pick their own representative and have some actual accountability to the people on the committee. As you probably know, ICANN and things like certain other parts of ICANN, if the board selects the members of a committee, then frequently the members of the committee feel like they're accountable to or want to maintain good relations with the board. And we're afraid that this stewardship committee would be like that unless we can say, okay, here's somebody we want to be on this committee to represent us. And I'm pretty sure other civil society groups feel the same way. So could we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a very legitimate comment. And as you probably know, and we'll put it in the chat, we opened a public engagement process yesterday, and for people to get comments just like that. Here's what we did to satisfy. Here's what Ethos did. Here's what and PIR helped announce it to satisfy the community on some of the concerns that have been raised. And I think once, from a structural standpoint, if you read the charter of the Stewardship Council, a couple points. First, the board is only picking the first, I believe, 5 members, and then there'll be a nomination process run by those 5 to appoint the next 2 and every other member thereafter. So it's not like I understand that why some folks might be concerned about like cronyism or something like that. I guess I don't see it that way, but I understand we need to protect against that. So that's a very legitimate comment that I recommend you raise in the public engagement process that we have going on right now. I think that also once you probably see, I've heard some of the names being bandied about, and I can't talk about them yet, but they're, you know, the kinds of luminaries that I don't think you'd be worried about not being independent. They're all the folks that they're talking about are very independent, very high stature folks, and like luminaries in the industry, as I say. So
Yeah, we're not too keen on luminaries.
yeah,
We
you know,
really aren't. I mean, we want people who have their feet on the ground and actually deal with domain name policy in the context of ICANN. And
well,
we have a lot of experience with so-called luminaries who, again, they just don't have any connections to the really community who are affected by that. And so
yeah,
anyway,
that's a fair point, Milton. I consider you a luminary, so be careful what you say.
well, I'm
uh,
a dim one these days.
so yeah, I think it's a very fair comment to get back to your question, and I recommend you put it in the public engagement mechanism. Rafik.
Okay. Thank John, and thanks Paul for this opportunity. I think we can say in the beginning that from NCIG standpoint, we are for this engagement, to have this constructive engagement. And when we send the letter, we really focus it in how it's about the protection of the registrant. We don't want to go into the other aspect. I don't think that what really matters in terms of the pure registrant interest. So with what Milton raised about the stewardship council, I think it's quite important because it will be the mechanism and the tool to ensure how the community is involved. My one point is just how we can learn from the previous experience and not to do in the same. I know like the advisory council has its charter changed in the way how the selection or appointment. So we don't want to have that situation, and also to not repeat what happened before, like when there was, I forget the name of the policy, it was quite controversial a few years ago. Understand that we will avoid that. So I guess it's more now is how to work into the details of the stewardship council. You have a charter. So one question is there will be some consultation process, and there will be kind of amendment to that charter. So if we can give some input based on our experience. And also I agree with Milton, it's really important to have people that they have knowledge about the domain name. If it's really about registrants and the domain policy is important, they have that experience. Because when I recall things I saw, like um, kind of misleading information, like people think that data will be sold, something like that. We don't. We need really the folks who understand the current policy and they are able to participate and giving educated guidance or advice. But I want to also ask if you can go more into the PIC and why you saw it's at the way really to ensure the contractual provision. So because the PIC has some history, and so just to understand why you saw it as kind of efficient, and if there is any other kind of plan to elaborate more or add other provision that to protect the registrant.
Yeah, thanks, Rafik. I'm just trying to unpack your questions. Let me start with the one where you talk about our advisory council. We have a great advisory council. They've been super helpful in the past, and the current one is, I'm only in the job a little over a year, but I've enjoyed working with our current counselors. And things like our anti-abuse policy that deal with free expression. we spent a lot of time in a room in October going through those. Here's what we do. Here's our policy. Here are our principles. We make them public. We make our takedowns public. We, we're in the position where we look at, various factors. What kinds of things do we look at when we're doing a suspension, whether it's, DNS abuse. If you look at our stats, we suspended 41,000 names last year for DNS abuse, farming, phishing, botnets, malware, things like that that pretty much everyone supports. We suspended 10 names for illegal content, 7 of which were child sexual abuse material, and 3 of which were illegal opioid sales. So we went through those kinds of stats, and the kinds of criteria we would look at and the proportionality of harms. And it was a very great discussion, and it was a very helpful discussion. But as you say, the advisory council deals with policy issues like that. We've been asked, how come the advisory council wasn't involved in looking at the transaction itself? And that was more at a board level. So, but to your question, how do you prevent the weakening of the stewardship council? We have certain commitments in here and in the charter, and how do you prevent that? And one way is actually, if you look at the charter, the stewardship council itself needs to approve any change in its charter that would weaken or change for the negative its purview or its scope. So we're at a point where I think that probably your concern probably is addressed there, but I'd encourage you to look at that charter and that provision, make sure it does what you want it to do in that regard. Why pick for some other vehicle? Like I said earlier, I think the pick is the strongest. It's a part of the contract, so ICANN has the right and the ability and the obligation to enforce it. And then, but other folks could do that as well, and that's the only part of a direct contract where you could get that. So we could put it in the main body of the agreement, the registry agreement, or we could put it in the registry registrar agreement, or something like that, or maybe it's an agreement with the government or something like that. Those are other vehicles. Those are other vehicles that you could use, but this vehicle is, everyone in the community has input to ICANN on in encouraging enforcement if they don't, but they have their own right to try to seek the enforcement on their own through the PIC DRP process. So it seems like it's the best enforcement mechanism. Now, in the past, there have been some concerns about voluntary PICs because there are provisions in there where it says this could be changed by the registry at any time, right? Or after 2 years, or for a good cause, or some language like that. There's no language like that in the PIC. Here, this this language is in there. It is what it is, and once it's approved, it could only be changed with agreement by ICANN. So there's no amendment process that. Certainly no unilateral amendment process or anything like that. So it's just like any other provision in the contract, but the enforcement mechanism is both by ICANN itself and anyone in the community. Now, if you have concerns about that, raise it in your comments, and I'm sure Ethos would like to hear it. Milton?
Hello. Yes, John, I really think, I really actually think that we're on the right track, and that you just have to make a few details. I mean, the PIC is, I think, the right vehicle. I think most of us agree with that. And if we compare PIR pre-sale to PIR post-sale, a lot of the people that are horrified are not making that comparison. and if you do make that comparison, you can see the potential for a lot of things that would be better. But like I say, you still need to take a couple of steps. So number one is the nature of the advisory council. And then on the free speech and abuse stuff, you just need to kind of wake up and smell the coffee in terms of who your fundamental constituency is. So you're dealing with a lot of civil liberties groups that are constantly dealing with censorship and takedowns in various kinds of authoritarian countries, as well as within developing countries, sometimes increasingly and frequently. This censorship flies under the flag of security or abuse. So one thing you could do is to, it's one thing to say we won't change our policy in a way that promotes censorship without the approval of the advisory council. But I think you could make people feel a lot better if you had kind of a more positive statement in the PICs about your commitment to freedom of expression and your willingness to tolerate divergent views and not be swayed by people who want to take things down because they don't like what's being said, and that's kind of part of your ethos, if you pardon the pun. Those kinds of things is what many of us are looking for. In addition to some of the structural changes, we want to just see that commitment to free expression.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. Some people have asked for more specific, what are you going to do about X, Y, and Z? And this is a 10-year pick. I'm not, thinking that it's makes sense to say what would you do in this specific instance. But a principle, like you're saying, I'm certainly open to that and think that's good input. That's what we do now, and we don't want to change. That's what they're telling us. We like what you're doing now, and we don't want to see it change. And we'll have a stewardship council to back that up to make sure that we don't do anything that the community doesn't like. So I like what we're doing now. I think we have the right balance, and we're very transparent with what we do. And I think that's the most important thing. A ratio of 41,000 to 10. Maybe some folks don't think we should have taken down those 10. I'm comfortable with working with the NCMEC in the U.S. or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children or the IWF in the UK or Internet Watch Foundation. I'm comfortable with that on child sexual abuse material, and we don't want to take action because we think it should be the hosting company that could do a surgical strike, or at least the registrar that has a contractual relationship with them. But if neither of those guys do anything, and it comes to us, and we get input from those organizations, then we will take action. And it happened 7 times in 2019. So it's it's out of 10 million names. It's not obviously a frequent occurrence, but we want to do the right thing while we can, and again, following our transparent principles. Looks like Bruna has a question.
Hi, hello everyone. Hey, hello John
Hi.
and Paul. Thanks again for the opportunity. I do wanted to back Milton's point on the human base, kind of finding a way of the PICs representing and embodying some basic human rights principles and commitments. And I do think that as we are seeing now, kind of the framework to address abuse is kind of the baseline for what sort of review you guys are proposing to the PICs, but maybe indeed embodying some more principles in that sense would be fine, and would be way more representative to this other part, this side of constituents that Milton was talking about. A lot of us who are under some sort of online scrutiny, such as abuse, violence, or things like that, online violence, and I'm mostly thinking here about gender groups and minorities as well. But I wanted to ask about this public engagement process, because we have asked ICANN at some point whether or not they would do this public engagement process. And the answer at the time was for us to go up to you guys and request for this engagement, and whatever will be this sort of openness that the broader community, the broader PIR community was requesting. So past this sort of what I'm calling public comment process, what else will happen? You will have the dates from yesterday until the 13th of March, and then will this period also bear more webinars and more communications on this? What will be the upcoming things we should be looking for?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. So I think we've done 2 webinars in the last 4 business days. So there was one yesterday, there was one late last week. I think we have more webinars coming. We're doing everything we can to do outreach, community engagement. We asked ICANN for a slot in for a face-to-face slot in Cancun. Obviously, that's not happening because the meeting's virtual. I'm not sure if we'll get on the formal agenda or not. I know that GAC's having a session that relates to the transaction. I'm sure there'll be other sessions in the meeting next week. We're at a point now where we announced in November, and it's now it'll be mid-March by the end of the ICANN 67. And so we're doing everything we can to talk to as many people as we can and get that kind of input, that that great input that you just provided about putting more principles in there. We'll work with Ethos to see if what changes to the process, to the substance, as Milton alludes to, getting in the nitty gritty, and we'll see what changes they're comfortable with, and then we'll need to make a decision at some point, and then we got to move on. It looks like there's another question. Is it Poncelet? I'm not sure.
Yeah. It's Poncelet. And
Great.
thanks, John.
No, thank
Paul.
you. Yeah.
Please. I just wanted to get more clarity on the public engagement process. I know you have done 2 webinars already. I want to know, apart from the Cancun meeting that was cancelled, whether you plan to do regional face-to-face, whether in the summer or in the coming in the next ICANN meeting, and if you're going to be having regional face-to-face, and if so, which particular regions of the world you'll be having those events. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure we'd be happy to have a face-to-face somewhere if we thought people would actually come. It's not inexpensive to fly places all over the world to meet with folks. So I'm not sure if people would actually fly in for that if we held something in the U.S. or Europe, especially with everything going on. I'm not sure if face-to-face makes sense at this point in the next few weeks. But as far as virtual calls, virtual meetings, we recently had a similar call to this with the ALAC policy group. We're talking to other groups. I know we have a webinar coming up regarding, I think there's one regarding the Stewardship Council. So there's sounds like there'll be good input for that one, and one about the future of the anti-abuse program and free expression and how that works. So I think folks on this call would probably be interested in that one as well, and we'll get those details out to you as soon as possible. So I think it's unfortunate, obviously, for a lot of reasons, what's going on with coronavirus, but it's unfortunate that we haven't had the opportunity to be in a room together in Cancun, because I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of and unfortunately some of it has been deliberate, and some of it is there's been a lot of personal attacks and stuff, and that I think that's really unfortunate, and that's why I respect people like Milton, that came out quickly and got right to the substance, and talked about, all right, this is what he's concerned about, this is what he thinks the community is concerned about, and that's the way to do it, as opposed to attacking people and personally. So I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, thanks for the clarity, John.
No, thank you. Joan, and then Rafik.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, John.
Hey, Joan. How are you?
So I'm great, thank you, and thanks for doing this outreach. It's really great. I have a question. I agree with all the suggestions around the PICs and things like that, so I'm not going to go through that. What I wanted to know is the Stewardship Council. On the last call, I think it was on Friday or Thursday, been so many webinars. The mention was that the outreach for new markets was in the developing world. Will the Stewardship Council represent people from the developing world as well?
Yeah. as far as the stewardship council and how they're selected and where they're from, yeah, I know they'll take a look at geographic diversity. I'm sure that's important, certainly in the initial selections, and I'm sure the stewardship council, that the initial selectees will take that into consideration for the subsequent selectees. As far as new markets from a marketing perspective, that requires what areas are make sense from a domain name standpoint. You don't want to spend a lot of money trying to develop a new market if we don't think the people in that market are interested in .org domain names. Or so India, for example, is a great market for us, and that's something that we really want to move forward with. Southeast Asia, some in South America. We're looking to see if there's anywhere in Africa that makes sense. So yeah, we're obviously taking that into account. And there were learnings with .ong and .ngo that PIR had from way back in the 2013 to 15 range. So we could hopefully learn from those activities and see what makes the most sense. Rafik, hope that answered your question, Joan.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank John. So just here, I guess, to be it's more a question about practical matters. So I understand there is now an open public consultation to get input and for several questions, including the charter and so on. I see that the deadline is quite soon. So just in case if there is any late submission, I hope that can be accepted. But I am also interested to know about the kind of the next steps. So you will consolidate or compile the different input and what will happen later. How you see the process? What kind of the timeline? It just help us also from our standpoint to see how we can participate and how to continue this engagement.
Yeah.
So
yeah, thanks, Rafik. I think we're kind of following U.S. government practices with regard to proposed rulemaking. So we put this out there. We're taking in comment. We'll publish all the comments that we get. With a high level summary. And then, ICANN at this point needs to figure out its process. There's the Attorney General process out there as well, as you know, and so there's a lot of moving parts. But the ideal is we'll collect this input, publish it. If there whatever changes there are to what Ethos is proposing, we'll get out and then work with ICANN to get to see their decision. Milton?
Just a question. You mentioned this Attorney General process. This is kind of mysterious to us. Is that have the potential to kind of throw away a bombshell in the whole thing? I mean, we kind of assumed that when Ethos made the original purchase that they had investigated the legalities of it. But what is the Attorney General process? What's at stake there?
Yeah, thanks. So as ICANN has announced, they received an inquiry from the California Attorney General that has jurisdiction over ICANN. And so, the ICANN's been working with the California Attorney General on this and broader issues that they're looking at. So, that process is ongoing, and there's the Attorney Generals in each state have jurisdiction over nonprofits in those states. So, the Attorney General of California has jurisdiction over ICANN because it's incorporated in California. So I don't know, how that process unfolds. And then where a PIR is incorporated in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So the Pennsylvania, as you probably know, has a process to look at this as well, this transaction, and make sure it's in the essentially they're looking at it from a nonprofit standpoint. And so you look at the nonprofit mission and of ISOC and of PIR. So those are complementary but different things going on. Yeah, in the chat room, Bruna, talks about a public forum on the .org sale. If that's something that ICANN wants to hold, we would be happy to participate in that. If we need to do that on our own, we could. That's essentially what our webinars have been, and we're happy to continue with those as well. So we're happy to do as much outreach and much engagement as we could. I think through dialogue we get better results. So we're very eager to do that.
Okay, thanks. Because I think the whole public forum is already announced with regards to the subject being on the PIR.org sale. So just maybe some new information we received from staff recently.
Could you say that again? You cut out.
Oh no. Oh, sorry. No, just saying that this information about the first public forum being on the .org sale has come from staff recently. So
okay,
it might be some new developments. We know that they were willing to do a meeting on this whole discussion at the ICANN meeting, but then we didn't, with this whole change to the virtual one, we didn't know whether or not it will be incorporated. But then apparently now is on the public forum.
That's great. We asked for that. We've been talking to them about it and asking for that slot as well. So it makes sense that they would do that. And again, we'd be happy to participate if we're invited. And I don't think it was on the public agenda yet. So that's why, I wasn't sure if that was official yet or not. So that's great.
Yeah, don't think it's yet as well. So
great. That's good news.
Any further questions, anyone? Because we still have almost 20 minutes. So, or if you guys have questions for us as well, or maybe thoughts or on how can we better participate of this engagement process as well, this is very welcome.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thanks, Bruna. I think the best thing to do is, if you think the PIC is a good vehicle, that I saw some chat on that, which I do. I think, whatever's in there, it's more enforceable than any other vehicle that I know of. So I would encourage you to participate in the public engagement process. I'd also, if you have specific changes or proposed changes, I would encourage you to do that. Some of them that I've seen just don't make sense, not necessarily from this group, but from I don't think they'll go forward, but I think some of them might very well, and so I'd encourage you to do that. Milton had specific changes in his various blogs, and I think those are worthwhile to consider. And some things that we've heard today about having more principles in there, that makes sense to me as well. So I'm not the decider, but we certainly have influence, and happy to take a look at your ideas and push for them.
Okay.
No, thank everyone for your time. I really appreciate it. I know it's early for some folks, and I guess late for some folks. So thank you for everything, and thanks for hearing us out. And if you have further input or questions or anything, please feel free to reach out. And look forward to seeing you at the next, the next face-to-face ICANN meeting.
Great. Thanks again, Paul and John, for this interaction, and we'll hopefully bring something to your consultation as well. So.
Great. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Bye, everyone.
John, thanks, Paul.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.